All right, David, the NHL trade deadline is fast approaching, and let's tackle some more of the names on our trade watch list here on the fourth period presented by Upper Deck. And we'll begin in Philadelphia with two, James Van Riemsdyk and Kevin Hayes.
Yeah, or two separate situations. JVR is an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season. Kevin Hayes has a few more years left on his contract. And we'll start with JVR, the pending UFA. I mean, all signs point to him being dealt. Justin Braun, by the way, also another guy on that back end that is likely to be traded out of Philadelphia. But JVR at a $7 million cap hit, Philly is going to have to retain money on that deal. And whether it ends up being a team like Carolina, like Vegas, like Minnesota, there are a lot of options for James Van Riemsdyk right now in terms of teams circling in. But they want to know exactly how much Philadelphia is willing to retain of that $7 million AAV, and then they'll figure out prices. I think this has the potential to get done closer to the deadline. It sounds like some teams are kind of waiting to see if prices drop, but the expectation is certainly that JVR will be dealt. As for Kevin Hayes, a guy with, as I mentioned, a few more years left on his contract, also comes with a big payday. But teams want to know how much, just like JVR, is Philly willing to retain on this deal, and that will affect the price. To get a player around of Hayes' caliber, around $4.5 to $5 million per season versus the $7.25 he's making, it's a lot more attractive. So this will be a hockey type move with retention if Hayes is dealt, and with some centermen already moved, like Bo Horvat and Jonathan Taves off the market, some teams might shift a little bit towards Kevin Hayes to see if they can make something happen.
Let's go to our nation's capital in Ottawa. And what teams could benefit from a guy like Cam Talbot?
Yeah, there are some teams looking around. There are teams rather looking around for goaltending. And Cam Talbot's a name that has popped up even before he was injured. Now he's back. He's expected to play later this week for the Ottawa Senators. And a couple teams that are keeping tabs on him believed to be the Pittsburgh Penguins and Vegas Golden Knights. There was some talk that LA might be in that mix, but it sounds like the Kings are going to roll with what they've got, with Phoenix Copley kind of leading the way. But Cam Talbot is a guy Ottawa's willing to retain a little bit there that could help stabilize the goaltending positions for either Pittsburgh or Vegas, or if there's another team that comes crawling out of the woodwork that needs some stability in net. Vegas is an interesting one because they're looking at a few different options, and it really depends on how long Logan Thompson is going to be out for. There's still some uncertainty over the overall health of him, so that might affect the trade market with respect to Cam Talbot, but Vegas is definitely in on that mix.
When we talked about doing this segment, Dave, you told me that there were two names that we were going to look at from the St. Louis Blues, and one was Colton Parayko and the other was Torey Krug. And I said, really? Who would be interested in trying to acquire guys? Well, you look at Colton Parayko, he just signed his deal, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's in year one of an 8-year, $52 million extension. Both he and Torey Krug, who I believe has 3 or 4 years left on his deal, they both have no trade clauses. So if anything happens here, they're going to have to sign off on it. Now, we reported this a couple of weeks ago. The teams were kicking the tires on Parayko's availability, and that just kind of spiked here in the last couple of weeks to the point now where we know some teams like Calgary and Ottawa have been knocking on the door. He's a right shot defenseman, big physical guy. Krug, a little smaller, more offensive, plays the left side. So there are a couple different options here for some teams that are looking to make some additions. But St. Louis is listening, and I've got to imagine that if things get serious, then the conversation with either player gets serious too, to see whether or not they would waive that full no trade clause. But still a little bit early as we record this 10 days ahead of the trade deadline. St. Louis, a very interesting team to keep tabs on, not just because of the blue line. They've got Ivan Barbashev they're going to trade at some point, not if, when. So there's a lot of activity happening in St. Louis, and I'm very curious to see how the defense plays out. They got a lot of it, and there's a lot of money there, which they're trying to free up.
Oh, Dave, our favorite time of the year, trade-related reason season. So let's see what happens. And when there's smoke, David, there's usually some fire. So it'll be an interesting next 10 days or so as we approach the NHL trade deadline.